This video will be the first in my new series covering 10 years of early Windows gaming, 1993 to 2002, similar to the ones I've made for Amiga and DOS and are still making for C64. So we'll start with Windows 3.11, then go through 95 and all versions of 98 all the way to XP. It will be a crazy ride, at least from my point of view, as we will start with simple 16-bit games, often based on Windows's interface and cheap FMV titles, and we'll close the series with high-end 3D games using acceleration and various different effects and technologies that I couldn't list here out of top of my head, even if I wanted to. We'll witness rise and fall of 3D effects too, which in itself is an interesting subject too. You will not find any built-in Windows games in the series though, no fully educational titles and a very limited selection of card games, as they're usually not very interesting to a YouTube viewer. Not to bore you to death though, let's get on with it. Castle of the Winds is a game you won't be able to try unless you either have an older real 16-bit Windows 3.11 based computer, or you run it in a virtual machine or under DOSBox along with the full Windows installation. All because its executables are 16-bit and our modern 64-bit systems are not compatible with their binaries anymore. But if you manage to get it to run, you may actually be positively surprised. Not with graphics or sounds, as graphics are early Windows appropriate, so not very good, and sound is virtually non-existent, but with everything else. Castle of the Winds is a top-down, entirely randomized and seemingly endless RPG. You start by creating a character for yourself, distributing points between stats, picking name and gender, and from then onward everything is randomized. Level maps, item drops and monsters stats, everything. And you keep exploring the game, fighting more and more difficult monsters, gathering loot and getting stronger, seemingly forever, or until you die. Cause I've never found an end to it. Its sequel had one, but I don't think the first Castle game does. In some aspects it's very similar to Diablo with that endless loop of random, but it's played in turns. Castle of the Winds is a surprisingly fun and addictive title despite simple presentation. Give it a go! Early 90s were a time of full motion video boom. Everyone thought that these games would be the future and everyone made them. The market was flooded with hundreds of these, and because of the number of games released alone, quite a few of them were really bad. Either acting was subpar or gameplay was odd, clunky and not thought out. Critical Path, an interactive movie adventure with some action sequences, fortunately is not that bad. It's not great either, it's average. And average in a sea of bad is, well, good. The game takes place on an island in post-nuclear world, where you crash landed your helicopter on the roof of a factory. Your copter needs a small part to be functional again, but since you're wounded, you send your partner Kat to get it. From this point onward, Kat sets out to find it, while you, wounded and in pain, stay in the control room helping her from within. So while you'll be solving various simple puzzles, Kat will be shooting and fighting enemies, setting traps, and overall trying to find and bring back the part while staying alive. Critical Path is definitely not the best FMV game out there, but it's not a bad one either, and it can be fun completing it once. Police Quest Open Season is the fourth installment in Sierra's point-and-click series of adventure games. This time you're John Curry, a homicide detective of LAPD, and you find your partner, Officer Bob Hickman, murdered in an alley in a southern part of the city. An 8-year-old boy has been murdered as well. You begin investigation into the case that eventually leads you deep into criminal belly underworld of the city on a hunt for a maniacal murderer. This time, even more than in previous games, focus is placed on realistic police procedures, so you'll spend a lot of time examining crime scenes and questioning suspects, which I suppose, at least for me, is half of the fun. The presentation has been considerably improved and the game now offers fully digitized locations and characters, adding to the realism and tension of investigation. Typically for Sierra, there are sections in the game where you can find yourself doing something that will result with your character dying. Unlike in all other Sierra's games, however, I can thematically see a reason for that, so it doesn't bother me as much. If you're into adventure games or, well, police work, Open Season is definitely worth a look. Earth Invasion is an action arcade game that features 3 entirely different kinds of shooters in one package, all accessible from within the main menu as missions. First is very similar to Galaga or Galaxian, with your ship at the bottom half of the screen shooting enemies coming from above. Second mission is side view and more similar to Defender than anything else, so you can turn around and fly in both directions, left and right, while defending citizens of the planet and shooting enemies. In third, you play in first-person view, straight from the cockpit of your fighter, in which you chase retreating enemies, shooting them down. While Earth Invasion offers quite a few weapon upgrades and ship power-ups to choose from, and an interesting for the time pre-rendered sprites of on-screen objects, I was never particularly fond of it, as it felt like each of the 3 games was incomplete. As if the game had 3 different developers, each with their own gameplay idea, and they couldn't agree on one. So they stuck all of them in, unfinished. It's not the case obviously, but that's how it feels to me. What? Oh, sure, I'll let them know. I'm sure they're dying to hear it. I'm sure you don't care, but my assistant asked me to tell you that, well, he's Batman. Freddy Pharkas Frontier Pharmacist is a western-themed point-and-click adventure. You play as titular Freddy, once the fastest gunslinger of the West, now a pharmacist wannabe. It's an unusual career choice for a cowboy, but one that circumstances made our Freddy pick, after a particularly bad shootout beat, which he barely survived, losing an ear in the process. The game is divided into 4 chapters, with first 2, and especially the first one, serving as a sort of a introduction to gameplay mechanics. It's also an excellent and filled with witty dialogues and humor parody of the West. The story is interesting, placing you in the very center of the plot, involving unknown force that rapidly drives people off the town of Korsgold. Freddy Pharkas is really fun, and you can expect to laugh out loud often, and both because of fun interactions with objects and characters, and hundreds of hidden gags, pop culture references and inside jokes. And no wonder, as it was made by the legendary Al Lowe of Leisure Suit Larry Games. You know what, I know it's a risky statement given the cult status and popularity of Larry, but I believe that Freddy Pharkas Frontier Pharmacist is Al Lowe's best game. Here you go, I said it. You can destroy me in the comments if you'd like. But keep in mind that Batman is my assistant, and he doesn't take well to extra work he has to do editing my replies to all the comments. Also, as I forgot to mention it, but it may be obvious, but what you're seeing, the game is pretty nice and stands out from many other early Windows titles presentation-wise. Gabriel Knight's Sins of the Fathers is a game that I first saw in a gaming MacBook when I still had an Amiga, and I instantly became jealous of PC users. Supernatural themes mixed with a bit of humor and a lot of mature detective work in a modern point-and-click game were sparking my imagination like no other title at the time. All that coupled with spectacular graphics promised an incredible adventure and a mystery to solve, which I had to wait few years longer to sample myself, but boy, was it worth the wait. Now, I don't want to mislead you here, as while I've mentioned detective work, you're not a detective per se, but a writer researching voodoo cult for a book. But as you do, you'll quickly spot web of intrigue surrounding it, and whether you want to or not, eventually you'll get to the heart of the mystery. And it's pretty much all that I'll tell you about the plot. Why? Because Gabriel Knight is excellent, and spoiling the gameplay and plot here too much would rob you of a sense of discovery and numerous oh shit moments that you'll no doubt have while playing. The story is so good in fact that it actually could have easily been a very successful movie given the right cast, director and a budget. If you've never played it and have a copy, give it a go, it's an adventure and a half, I promise. I believe that Gearworks is one of the most underrated early 90s puzzle games. Probably because it looks and sounds well below average for 1993. And since it doesn't look very entertaining judging by the screens only, audiences of the time could have easily disregarded it in favor of more colorful, more easily distinguishable from others title. It's a mistake though, as Gearworks is actually a pretty good game and a very enjoyable puzzler. Sure, it may not be the most difficult one, at least initially, and quite repeatable at that, but I always thought of it more as a relaxed puzzler. One you can just get into, go through level after level, letting your mind wander rather than flexing all your brain cells all throughout. If you're looking for a bit of R&R and just don't dig high-octane action games, Gearworks may actually be something for you. Get the Girl looks bad, sounds bad, and guess what? It also plays really bad. But I had to include it as an example of early Windows stinkers. It is, for the lack of a better word, a seduction simulator where you tackle conversations with series of women trying to convince them, to put it lightly, to be with you. Each of them has a different personality and characteristics, so they react uniquely to the same things you can say to them. Unfortunately, the dialogues don't sound realistic at all, they are often what should be cited in Urban Dictionary under a definition of cringe, and seem as if they were conceived by a few horny teens who've never spoke to a real woman. Not saying that's the case here, but not denying the possibility either. But man, fact check it for me buddy when you've done with that pizza, alright? Get the Girl is not a very entertaining title, but one worth experiencing just for the heck of it, as it shares a lot with Sharknado movies that I often talk about when explaining things that are so bad to their core that they ironically become good in some odd and mysterious way. Get the Girl is at times like that. Not all the way through though, so approach it only if you really have nothing better to do. I'm sorry, what? Oh, you didn't find anything. What? Sure buddy, but only if you get off the couch and do some work for once. Do we have a deal? Great. Now, I'm not gonna go into any details or reasoning behind it, but Batman asked me to make sure that you know that he did got the girl. Her name was Catwoman, but he was also known to date Elephant Missy and Porcupine Lady at some point in his long Playboy career, so there's that. Gettysburg, an interactive battle simulation, is precisely that. An interactive, real-time battle simulation depicting the biggest and most important battle of American Civil War, and you can take side of either Union or Confederacy to lead it to victory. Or failure, cause you know, in each battle there's gotta be a loser. All the units, terrain, morale, ammunition and every other factor that was historically recorded is recreated within the game to be realistically represented for the simulation purposes. It's clear from the get-go that a lot of attention was put into those details to offer as close to life battle as it was possible in 1993. Gettysburg is played in real time and has 4 speed settings. Each corresponds to number of seconds used to represent a minute of real-life Battle of Gettysburg. The graphics are rather simple, but they don't really need to be overly detailed or complicated in a heavily strategic title. And if you're into very detailed, very accurate historical tactical games, you'll love Gettysburg despite the presentation. It's very difficult to speak about Hellcup as if it was a game. I mean it is, no doubt about that, but there's such a little degree of interaction that at times it feels more like a grainy, heavily compressed, digitized movie than a game. It's even more disappointing when you realize after figuring out correct choices that it can be completed in under an hour. But since most of you don't, and to be honest I don't either anymore, it will be considerably longer. All because of all the trial and error that you'll partake in. Story-wise, you're a traveler. Well, perhaps you're not, but in the game you are, so deal with it. And when you learn that your plane that was supposed to leave from JFK in New York was delayed, you decide to take a cab ride throughout the city and take in the sights. As it turns out, the driver works for the devil, and when you realize that you had no money to pay for the fare, you made a bad deal with him. And now you'll have to travel to different time periods to save your soul. Hellcup is a collection of FMV clips that are interrupted by some very basic and not very entertaining action sequences. The story, while odd, is not that bad, so if there's anything making the game worth experiencing, it is it. When I'll say that Hoyle Classic Card Games is just that, series of 8 classic card games, I'm sure many of you will skip to the next title in this video. And I understand that, as not everyone likes card games. But those that do are in for a treat. Because while there's not much technically speaking that can be done to reinvent the rules of these, the choice of titles and presentation is top-notch, so playing Hoyle Classic is a blast. The games on choice are Bridge, Euchre, Old Maid, Gin Rummy, Hearts, Cribbage, Crazy 8s and Klondike. And while Hoyle Classic is exclusively single player, you can measure yourself against the CPU, playing versus either old-timey stylized characters or Sierra's owned heroes from their other games. Hoyle had a DOS version released the very same year too, and if you have a choice, I'd recommend sticking to Windows for convenience. Other than that, they're both identical. Calling Iron Helix an action game feels weird, as it's a collection of static screens and an occasional video clips depicting action. But they're mostly images, so... Anyway, Iron Helix is an action thriller with a very unusual setting and a plot. One of the deadliest and most dangerous military ships has gone bad, with all of its crew dying from an unknown mutagenic virus. Even worse, a different kind of a virus, a computer virus, overtook craft's internal systems and is about to destroy the world with ship's considerable and deadly armament. Your ship is the closest, so you have to deal with it. But you're no hero, you're a simple cargo holder. I mean, of course you are a hero, but in the game you're not. So don't take it personally. Anyway, the logic behind the cargo sailor being the best one for such an important job is as suiting as sending all drillers on an asteroid in space to blow it up with nukes. But whatever, it is what it is. So you're sending a maintenance robot drone to the ship to penetrate it, figure out all the locks and defenses, overcome them and stop the potential world-ending event. You'll be remotely going about the ship, learning what happened, opening passages and looking for a way to solve the puzzle that this whole scenario is. Some of the data ports you'll investigate will require you to gather DNA samples from late crew members to access them, so there's that too. Every time you access any data point, ship's self-defense system will send a robot that will try to eliminate your drone. So you'll have to always think a few steps ahead, plan your moves to learn and figure out as much as possible while avoiding distraction. Despite the odd starting off point, Iron Helix is actually an excellent thriller, and if you enjoy movies in a genre, you'll fall in love with this game too, I think. King's Quest VI, Heir Today, Gone Tomorrow is a point-and-click adventure game. Story-wise, it's as good as expected, not in small part thanks to legendary Roberta Williams, who was responsible for the best Sierra games. The most interesting part of King's Quest VI, however, is how the game is designed. Almost half of all puzzles is optional, many of them have more than one solution, and because of game's open-world design, they can be completed in any order. Even better, more or less midway through the game, you'll be able to choose to follow the longer, more puzzle-oriented, or shorter story path. The longer results in more satisfying game ending, but many of the parts of the ending are based on the choices taken throughout the game, so they can vary considerably each playthrough, if different riddles are solved and especially if they're completed in different ways. While King's Quest VI is nowhere near being the best adventure game for PC, it's definitely one of the more interestingly designed ones. It features incredible sound design with fully voiced cast on the CD release and beautiful 256 color VGA graphics. Lost Secret of the Rainforest is the sequel to EcoQuest: The Search for Cetus that we spoke about in one of the past episodes of the DOS Gaming History series. The game stars same protagonists, Adam and his father Noah Green, and is also a point-and-click adventure with a very prominent pro-eco background. You play as Adam, and once again get separated from your father while on expedition into the rainforest. If constantly losing your kid in dangerous places is not a reason to contact Child Protective Services, I don't know what is. Anyway, you decide to venture deeper into the rainforest, where you learn that the so-called forest heart is dying and that it can only be saved by the tribe known as Grove People. You quickly learn that you'll need to find mysterious legendary city of gold for the Grove People to be able to save the forest heart, so you set out to do just that, Goonies style. So without preparation or any means of understanding what you're up against. Lost Secret of the Rainforest, same as its predecessor, is aimed at kids and young teens, so it's not very demanding. Puzzles usually have pretty easy to figure out solutions, but to counteract it, they're very varied. And not only limited to juggling items in your inventory. You can't get irreversibly stuck or die in the game either. But even though it's aimed at younger audiences, it's actually a pretty fun, light-hearted adventure accompanied by beautiful audiovisual presentation that not many titles in the genre could compete with in 1993. So if you like adventure games, care for the environment, or have a kid somewhere around getting bored with no access to a tablet or a smartphone, give the game a chance. You may have by now realized that sadly many of the early Windows games were not great. And trust me when I say that the worst stinkers are not even included in this video. But the early days for Windows gaming were not easy. We did not have 30-bit system or DirectX libraries, and at least when compared to DOS, Windows back then was not well-suited system for gaming. But as we go through the series episode by episode, year by year, especially from 1995 onward, the tides will turn and all gaming will slowly start moving towards Windows as a more feature-rich, better platform. That will take time though. Today we're talking about 1993, or a part of it really, and a gaming subject is MagnaFlux Runner, which sounds like a condition that will send you straight to the toilet when overdosing on magnesium. But believe it or not, it's not. It's a two-player top-down arcade racing that had some neat ideas but overall ended up being rather blunt and disappointing. The cars raced against each other over numerous laps and they can shoot and drop mines. They are both also targeted by a cannon and laser and can be damaged by floating clouds and a brick wall too. If that wasn't enough, there is also an electromagnet that affects their driving trajectory, turning on and off periodically. All that makes for a very frustrating and hardly entertaining racer that could work if it was better designed, but it didn't, cause it wasn't. Kinda like Batman, now that he does not fight crime. He could have been a great hardworking employee, but isn't, cause he doesn't. Yeah, Bruce, whatever, I don't pay you anyway. Microsoft Arcade is rather basic and not imaginative collection of 5 classic arcade titles with some background information about them. And I say that they're not very creative in their design because they are basically just original arcade games moved to Windows. One could argue that they did not need changing, and I get that, but a little novelty or an extended extra game mode would be nice. Something to make it feel more than a straight-up conversion. That said, as sports go, these are very good, and arcade perfect nearly in every aspect. Included background information and trivia on the games is a fun little bonus too. Oh, and I realize I haven't mentioned the included games yet. They are Asteroids, Battlezone, Centipede, Missile Command, and Tempest. If you enjoy arcade games, especially those that came out late 70s, early 80s, Microsoft Arcade is definitely something for you. I love golf games. I love them alone, I love to play them against others, they're my jam. Kinda like any jam is Batman's jam, as he seems to be munching on anything crunchy and or sweet, and jam fulfills at least one of these two requirements. Come to think of it, you know what he told me recently? That he invented a new kind of a sandwich. Instead of PB&J, he made J&J, and just used 2 different flavors of jam. You gotta give him that while he may not be hardworking anymore, he definitely is still creative. Anyway, as I was saying, I love computer and console golf games, which may be a bit odd as I never played it in real life. Always wanted to, but the clubs are expensive and I hardly ever have free time, so I sorta always pushed it away for later, and it's been years since I first thought of it, and still aren't any closer of playing it. Microsoft Golf Multimedia Edition is basically Link's 386 Pro, but for Windows and a little lighter on the courses. And it's not an overstatement because Bruce Carver from Access Software dipped his toes in it. And he is responsible for both legendary leaderboard golf titles on 8-bit machines and Link's series of games on 16-bit systems. It includes a full 18-hole San Diego Torrey Pines South course, and up to 8 players can compete in this beautiful 256 colors high-resolution golfing bonanza. There's 14 clubs available, tee of positions for rookie, amateur and pro golfers, covering all possible player skills, and the game even allows for adding an extra courses through Access Software's Link's Golf add-on. Microsoft Golf is an incredibly fun and fulfilling golfing experience, even if it only comes with one pre-built course. So if you're a fan of a sport or enjoy an occasional round, you're gonna love it. I would even risk saying that it was the best golf game on PC in 1993. Myst is a first-person perspective point-and-click adventure game. You play as character simply known as the Stranger, who has been sucked in through the magical book into a mysterious island world of Myst, and you will have to uncover all of the island's secrets and solve its numerous, often mechanical puzzles. Myst is not a game for kids, and not because it portrays nudity or violence, cause it doesn't. In fact, you can't even die in Myst. It's not a game for kids because most of its puzzles are actually pretty challenging and requiring you to pay attention to anything and everything you come across, gathering clues spread more or less obviously within the game world, and then use the knowledge obtained to work out and solve the puzzles within various devices. As you uncover the island's secrets, you'll get to travel using other books to different time ages and experience them too. The game world is displayed using mostly static images and operated with just a mouse cursor and no verbs, icons or anything else. The game overall is an experience rather than the exercise in overly and needlessly complicated control interfaces. If you enjoy demanding adventure games or consider yourself a smart and logically thinking person, try Myst out, you're not going to be disappointed. Pepper's Adventures in Time is a second in today's video semi-educational point-and-click adventure game from Sierra, and also an excellent one. I have to admit that while I was never a fan of their early adventure titles using text parsers, I really enjoyed their later games, those that used mouse interface and did not force you to participate in typing exercises. I still don't think that they're as good as LucasArts' games were, but they are pretty darn close. As the title suggests, you play as Pepper, a young red-haired lassie that gets involved in her evil uncle's Ed's crazy time-traveling scheme. Oh my god, I said lassie. Cringe, cringe, cringe. Batman, edit that out, buddy, don't let them hear me say it. Thanks. Ed plans on changing the past to affect the future and secure his line superiority in it. So when Pepper and her dog get sucked into a time portal and lands in colonial times, she knows that she has to deal with the situation herself. And since her dog got stolen upon arrival in the past, she needs to save both, her puppy Lockjaw and America. Sounds epic, I know, but same as the EcoQuest sequel, Pepper's Adventures in Time is directed towards younger audiences, so all the puzzles that you'll encounter will usually be based in pure but simple logic without any trial and error shenanigans. The story and characters that you'll meet are so fun though, that any fans of the genre, whether they want to or not, will love the game. Oh, and as you can see, the graphics are of very high quality and a little abstract, similar to LucasArts' Day of the Tentacle in this regard. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is an extremely bad game in all aspects, literally just a tiny bit better than the infamous Pro Soccer 2190. Come to think of it, calling it a game may be a stretch, and honestly I can't think of a single good thing to say about it. Other than luckily it's not the aforementioned Pro Soccer. But it's hardly a good thing about it, rather a bad one about the different title. I don't think anyone will particularly like Plumbers, the game, not the workers, and it's only here to serve as an example of how oversaturated the market was in the early 90s with rushed, cheap and often shallow digitized graphics games. What's worse, it's not really even an FMV game either, as it has maybe a couple of these sequences tops and is mostly showing still images with a terrible voiceover. And these pictures are not great at all. They're badly filtered, awfully framed and generally speaking visually unimpressive. In essence, it's supposed to be a dating simulator, but there's very limited interaction and mind-numbingly boring story. Imagine this, you're a plumber that's down on his luck when it comes to his love life and you need to romance a young blonde going by the name of Jane. At any given point you have a set of choices and as soon as you see them, you'll know which answer is correct, or rather, which game wants you to pick. So completing the whole fair, even as boring as this one, is a breeze. And even if you manage somehow to pick a bad choice, the game will give you a takeover and return you to the point where you'll be able to pick the correct one. Can you see now while I was hesitant on calling it a game? You can't even make the wrong choice and face the consequences. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is an 18+ title, which is even more weird than the whole crappy rest of it. Cause while it tackles subject of romance, there's no obscenities in it, no serious violence and even no real nudity whatsoever. If I was you, I would not only avoid it but also erase it from your memory forever, not to waste any of it on the title alone. But if I was you, you would be me, and I'm not sure that my assistant would take kindly to that change. Especially that he's grown accustomed to the layout of my home and learned all the fastest routes to the fridge and toilet, so it would inconvenience him a lot to move again. So, that's the first episode of our new series done. What do you think of the games? For me, it's a mixed bag if I'm to be honest. Some were really amazing while others were utter crap, but I suppose that's early Windows for you. But while it started the way it did, believe you me, the further we go in the series, the better the games we'll get to see. I have a special one planned for one of the 1995's episodes, as one of my all-time favorites released then, and it's a game most people never heard of. So it's also an excellent title for the possible not yet planned or confirmed obscure Windows games video. a true hidden gem with incredible MIDI soundtrack. Putt-Putt Goes to the Moon is a point-and-click adventure aimed at the very young audience. Content-wise, 4 to 8-year-olds seem to be the target. While Putt-Putt's visiting the fireworks factory, Pep slips and accidentally sends them both skyrocketing to the moon. Out there, Putt-Putt must find and acquire all the pieces of the rocket ship to get them both back to Earth. While the game is very simple adventure title, simple enough for preschoolers to understand and complete, some of the added arcade minigames are incredibly difficult compared to the rest of it. It's an unfitting, odd choice, but it is what it is. So while the game is really kid-friendly, colorful and free of any not safe for work moments, it's hard to recommend it really, because of it being so uneven. So yeah. Quantum Gate is an interactive movie type of a game, with an emphasis on the movie rather than the game. It's a first-person action-adventure taking place on a distant planet that's in a war with aliens in the not-so-distant future of 2057. You play as Private Drew Griffin, an army medical student sent off on a secret mission to said planet. There you'll discover that the advanced simulation predicted that the Earth will stop being able to sustain life in 5 years, at least not in the same capacity it did before, all because of the pollution and industrialization. From then, it's a snowball effect to extinction. That's sadly not that far off. You will also learn that you're a part of so-called Eden Initiative, a project aimed at stopping this process before it's too late. And it's pretty much all I'll tell you about the story, cause it's actually pretty good, with couple of "oh no they didn't" moments and even a very big and mind-blowing ending. But what I can tell you about is the gameplay. That's linear, same as in movies, and interrupted by a conversation with characters and some very basic action sequences. I have very mixed feelings about Quantum Gate, because while it's outstanding as an interactive movie with an interesting and deeper than it has any reason to be story and thought-provoking message, the gameplay itself is rather lacking. Given how fun and touching the story is, especially near the end of it, I have no choice to recommend Quantum Gate despite my reservations. Especially that compared to all other FMV-based titles released in 1993, it's a masterpiece. Quenzar's Caverns is a minuscule single-player turn-based dungeon-crawling RPG. In short, you're Batman. Well, not really him, as it would have meant that you're sitting behind me munching on something religiously and playing some kind of a gacha game on your phone, but Batman as in true hero, a savior, a good guy to defeat the evil. And you decided to do just that, find and kill evil wizard Quenzar, who is plotting to take over and rule the kingdom. While the game world is randomly created at each playthrough, the map is always 10 by 10 square, with each cell being a different room. Your main task is obviously to find the evil wizard, but to do so you have to find the key for his lair, and additional helpful equipment traversing the rooms and fighting monsters. So basically, to summarize, what you need to do is gather enough resources, find the key, locate the stairway to the wizard's lair, and defeat him. Simple as that. But most rooms, other than the monsters, also have searchable objects like desks, hidden doors, pools of water, etc. And this can contain anything from potions and scrolls through rings and armor, to weapons and even a little of team, hand grenades. Sometimes, if you're lucky, even a special items like a compass of guiding that always directs you towards the golden key and entrance to Quenzar's lair. Given how small the game is and that it can be completed in under an hour if you know what you're doing, it's really amazing how much content was packed in. It's also an excellent game to just fire off while having a snack or just killing time. Quest for Glory Shadows of Darkness, same as its predecessors, is once again a mix between point-and-click adventure and role-playing. You can import the character from previous outing or create a new one, and it can be either a fighter, thief, magician or a paladin. The game starts with you being mysteriously teleported from a tavern you were having a time of your life in into mysterious land of Mordavia, inspired by the Eastern European medieval kingdoms. But you don't land in a castle, forest, town or even at an empty wheat field. Oh no, your life would be way too easy then. You will find yourself stripped of everything in a dark cave seemingly in the middle of nowhere. Believe it or not, but your quest will not be for glory, but to figure out what kind of darkness overtook the land outside of the main city's gates. As in all the previous games, an adventure and a half awaits you, and if you love either point-and-click games or light RPGs, you'll love this installment in Quest for Glory Series 2. Skills, as per usual, improve upon use, and it's worth working on them as they may end up being required to solve some of the puzzles. Combat system has been modernized quite considerably and is now real-time side view like in a simple fighting game, and you can move freely, defend, attack and jump during battles. Simply put, Quest for Glory is super fun. If you'll have a chance, grab it and play it. Shadowgate for Windows is a modernized version of the 1987's DOS classic. It's an adventure game set in a fantasy world where you're sent off to the ancient keep of Shadowgate on a quest to find the mysterious artifact known as the Staff of Ages, and also stop evil warlock from summoning the powerful and deadly demon Behemoth. I always thought it was Baphomet, but clearly I was wrong. The keep itself is filled with various monstrosities, mythical and demonic alike, and full of traps to stop any and all adventurers stupid enough to try to stand in the warlock's way. Since you're gonna be traveling through the dark and evil-filled fortress, it's crucial that you keep a source of light with you, at all times. If I wasn't clear, I meant at all times. I mean, you're not a man-bat, you don't own a bat cave, and had no prior chance to get accustomed with the overwhelming darkness. You're a day creature, a dayman.
You're a master of karate and friendship for everyone.
Hero or no hero, stay in the light, cause outside of it, death awaits. Come to think of it, death is actually everywhere. And Shadowgate is probably the game in which it's the easiest to die out of all the adventure titles that I've ever played. I mean, a single wrong click, a small decision, anything can kill you. And it will, so be careful, save often, and consider all possible outcomes of all smallest decisions that you'll make. Or don't play the game, one of the two. Windows's version of Civilization is basically one-to-one copy of DOS original with some slight quality of life improvements, like support of higher resolution, ability to move some windows, world map and status being the obvious ones, and slightly facelifted graphics. Perhaps not much, but it made for much more enjoyable gameplay in higher fidelity. And Sid Meier's Civilization is not only one of my most favorite series of games, but this first installment, despite gamers' personal preferences, is arguably one of the most important games in the whole history of gaming. I don't think there's anyone who haven't heard about, or at least have a passing knowledge of Civilization, but just to be on the safe side, I'll try to explain. The simplest way of describing what it is to try to comprehend the encompassing meaning of the word itself. Because that's what the game is. It tells a story, or more appropriately, you design with your action and choices the story of your own nation. From prehistoric times to the future, through all the eras in between. So you'll build and expand cities, deciding what buildings and units should be produced in them. You'll exploit natural resources, expand into wider areas, explore the unknown, and finally, exterminate any and all enemies if need arises. On top of that, you'll also be directly involved in deciding how your nation's technological progression should look like. You'll directly control all units, both during war and in peaceful time, and you'll be the one who'll lead your people to glory. Or failure. If any of that sounds interesting to you, you owe yourself to try this gem of a game. And since First Civilization is the easiest in the series, it's an ideal gateway drug to that just one more turn disease that so many of us suffer from. And there's no cure on the horizon. VR in Spectre VR is a clickbait, or buy-bait to be precise. There's nothing VR about it. Batman is more of a VR assistant to me than this game is VR whatever. Why? Cause he feels virtual to me as he's not doing his work, but he's at least actually here. You gotta trust me on that. Our contract does not let me show him on a video, I'm afraid. And Spectre VR is not VR. It does not mean that it's a bad game, however, quite the opposite if you manage to find a couple of others who have it and are willing to play it online. Because while it can be played locally with bots or in split screen mode, it really spreads its wings in online multiplayer. Having 8 people chase each other in different tanks, shooting various weapons in this futuristic simple filled and shaded wireframe graphics is amazing. And this is the main reason why the game failed. Because while it offered fun gameplay modes and honestly fulfilling gameplay, there weren't many people gaming online in 1993. And those that did played Doom. Take a Break Pinball, aka Dynamics Pinball, is Sierra's take on pinball moved onto the Windows platform. It features 8 different tables based on Sierra's other famous games. So there's one based on Leisure Suit Larry, one on Nova 9, one on Adventures of Willy Beamish, one on King's Quest, and 3 on Space Quest series. And for the most part, they all don't look that bad and play adequately. Which, you know, in any other genre would be fine, but by 1993 we had a lot of amazing and not only good enough pinball games under DOS. Games like Pinball Dreams, Pinball Fantasies, or even Epic Pinball, and they were all leagues ahead in terms of everything: graphics, music and sound, complexity, and most importantly fun. So Take a Break Pinball did just that, took a break from sales and stayed largely irrelevant, forgotten and obscure as no one cared about it when competition was so strong. Upon its release in 1993, the Chessmaster 4000 Turbo was the absolute best chess simulation on the market. And believe it or not, it's still a pretty damn solid game to this day. Easily good enough to beat me most of the times, and from time to time even Batman. Though he always blames his losses on a heartburn or belly aches. Who knows, maybe it really is the case. Still, Chessmaster 4000, while having nothing turbo in its design other than being the first game in the series to use 32-bit executables, is a beautifully looking game. You can view the chessboard from above, under an angle, or in full 3D, and there's many custom sets if you like variety or just prefer a particular style of board and pieces. Chessmaster also features a library of 500 real-life historical famous games and knows and uses countless various opening moves. If you're someone who likes chess, you'll love it as numerous different difficulty levels allowed for playing the game at the challenge that you're most accustomed to, and you can also play online with others if that's your thing. Come to think of it, I actually don't know if online play would still work today as it was only over modem or LAN, but whether it does or doesn't, important thing is it's a great chess implementation that seasoned players would most definitely enjoy, and complete newbies can feel comfortable trying. The Dagger of Amon Ra, aka Laura Bow 2, is Roberta Williams' point-and-click adventure masterpiece and a sequel to earlier The Colonel's Bequest. And as sequels go, this is superior to first Laura Bow in every aspect. The story is better, the controls are streamlined and more user-friendly, the graphics are considerably upgraded, and even sounds and music are of much higher quality. The game is a true murder mystery, and it's not only perfectly written, but features interesting and deep cast of characters and captivating story. You play as Laura Bow, a newbie in a New York newspaper who's about to write a story about newest exhibit in Leelander Museum, an ancient and mystical titular dagger of Amon Ra. During the museum's opening celebrations, the dagger is stolen and a person is murdered. Laura wants to investigate and talks her way in just to be locked inside with the rest of the guests. This, however, is not the end and the murders will continue. And it's up to you, controlling Laura, to figure out who's responsible. Funny enough, there's not that much of a typical adventure games puzzling in Dagger of Amon Ra, and while you'll be gathering items, they will be used as evidence or to solve the mystery. You'll explore the museum and question people inside, trying to find their motives, alibis, and most importantly, the killer. Batman's telling me to let you know that usually when you can't tell who the killer is, you're the killer. It's not the case here, but keep that in mind for the future. It may come in handy. He was, after all, world's greatest detective. The game clock advances as you play, usually triggered by specific situations and occurrences, and you must be constantly aware of it as some information or events may only be available in specific places and times. At the end of the game, Laura will be asked a series of questions by the coroner, and based on what you found out and deducted along your investigation, you may answer them correctly and pinpoint the killer. Which reminds me of a board game I played with a buddy of mine 2 weeks ago on Saturday. It's called The Detective, a Modern Crime board game, and it was hella fun. It places you in shoes of investigators working closely with FBI to solve a mystery that's composed out of 5 smaller cases. And only when you complete all 5, a whole story will unveil. We've done just the first chapter so far, but it was really cool. In all honesty, the board is virtually irrelevant in the game because most of it is actually played over it. So you go around the town gathering clues, questioning suspects, searching through databases, and even can use Wikipedia and Google search. Then you place pictures with your notes on a board if you have one, or table if you don't, and solve the case like they do in the movies. It's great. I really don't know why I said it all, you don't care about that. So, Laura Bow 2 The Dagger of Amon Ra is really fun, and if you like detective work, you'll love it. The even more incredible machine is a follow-up to the original game and a really fun puzzler. It features all of the 87 puzzles from the first title, 73 new ones and new parts for your mechanisms. I was enchanted by the first incredible machine when it came out, or when I got to play it to be precise, which was probably a year or two later. In essence, it's a collection of numerous levels with puzzle objective in each to complete, that has to be solved by use of limited in number items. So you arrange set objects all around the game screen to fulfill your required task. You're basically assembling a Rube Goldberg contraption to do so. And while most objectives are as simple sounding as put the basketball in a basket or turn on something, with each passing level completing them becomes more challenging. Especially that after a while some levels feature special conditions like different gravity or air pressure than that found on Earth. The incredible machine is just that, incredible. It's equally as enjoyable for a grown-up to stretch their brain muscle as it is for a kid to have fun coming up with imaginative, sometimes ridiculous contraptions that, while may not always work, are pretty much always fun to tinker with. And Windows version of the game is identical to the DOS one, just under Windows. The Greens is a mini-golf game for up to 4 players, and despite working in small window, it's a pretty fun one. The aim obviously is to complete each of the 18 included holes in as few shots as possible, or 5 holes in a shareware version. As you'd expect from a Windows release, all controls are mouse-based and pretty easy to understand, even if not the most user-friendly that I've seen in the genre. You have 8 strokes to complete each hole, and if you don't manage to do it within the limit, the game passes on to the next player anyway. It's a simple game, don't expect any bells and whistles, but if there's few of you and all you'll have available for whatever the reason is Windows 3.11 with a basic graphic card, then I could imagine worst way to spend your time. The Journeyman Project's devs claimed that it was the very first photorealistic game. It's hardly the case, but as games using FMV sequences go, it's actually incredible. Not because of their quality, which is pretty good but nothing out of ordinary, but because of the captivating plot that will take you to many different places in space and time. The year is 2318 and humanity is about to sign a historic peace with an alien civilization of symbiotry. It's a groundbreaking moment and one that will pave peaceful and prosperous future for our kind for centuries to come. Unfortunately, it seems that some unknown force is meddling with the timeline, changing events and affecting the future. So you're present. You, as a member of the team assigned to guarding the time vehicle, have to save the world and future once again. Come to think of it, I've witnessed you saving the world or universe even, but I'm not sure I've witnessed you fixing time. Perhaps it's the first one for both of us. So, you'll visit both past and future in many different time periods, trying to solve the mystery behind the changes and undo modifications made to the timeline. The Journeyman Project is a first-person adventure game filled with many high-quality FMV sequences, high-resolution pre-rendered graphics, all accompanied by a stellar CD-quality soundtrack and digitized voiceovers. It's a great example how amazing FMV games can be made that are not reliant on video gimmick only and can actually serve interesting and involving story that you'll be keen on seeing all the way through. Who Killed Sam Rupert Virtual Murder 1 is a first in a series of adventure detective games with digitized FMV graphics. In this first episode, you play as police detective trying to solve the case of Sam Rupert's murder. He was a restaurant owner and has been found killed in his own establishment. So to figure out who did it, and especially that the higher-ups are giving you only 6 hours to solve it, just in time for the press conference, you will have to gather clues and interview witnesses looking for any details and try to work out which out of 8 suspects is responsible. Each action, big or small, takes certain appropriate amount of time to perform, and after 6 hours mark is passed, the case is over and you must attend the press conference and explain what you found out to be able to arrest the guilty person from a narrowed down list of 3 suspects. There are 3 separate and different endings depending on which out of 3 possible motives you'll find. Who Killed Sam Rupert sounds like a hella fun title, nearly identical to the board game I told you about a few minutes ago. So it should be great, right? Well, while the gameplay mechanics idea is sound, the limited number of different actions that you can take and rather simple plot makes it a mediocre game. It's not bad per se, it's just not something that you'll be talking about much after completing. The Magic Dev Virtual Murder 2 is the last game in the series that we'll talk about today. And same as with Who Killed Sam Rupert, it's a first-person adventure detective FMV romp. This time, however, an anthropologist was found dead in her apartment in an odd voodoo-like ritualistic murder. Even if not much, the devs had some time to polish the formula and make the game better. Did they though? Well, yes, they did. There's not much improvement, however, and it's just a smudge better. The plot is a bit more complicated, there's 12 possible suspects now instead of 8, you're limited to 6 hours to complete the investigation and present the suspect during press conference afterward. The changes are so minuscule that it'd be better if it was called Virtual Murder 1.5 and not 2.0. Batman's saying that the cases, like in these 2 games, he didn't even solve himself, he used to just send Robin to take care of them. So yeah, world's greatest sidekick and not even detective is all it takes to solve them. Sadly or not, depends on how you wanna look at it, the remaining 2 games in the series that came out later were not improved considerably either. So if you like these 2, you'll like the other, and if you didn't, then you won't. Simple as that. The Oregon Trail is one of the very first few roguelites. Yeah, I said it. And it is if you think about it. You're going from Independence, Missouri to Willamette River and Valley in Oregon, so you have to stock up on provisions so that they would last as long as possible, and then while traveling plan out your daily schedule, to take groups' needs into consideration, so how much they should eat, when to rest, etc. You'll also hunt cross rivers and react to various happenings, good or bad, that will without a doubt sooner or later befall upon your group. Oregon Trail is one of the most influential games in history of all gaming, and countless kids grew up with it, learning about stock management, hardships of colonial times, and infamous dice entry. Not many people realize, however, that in reality most of us saw either Oregon Trail Deluxe or Oregon Trail 2 growing up, rather than the first title, which compared to the other 2 is rather simplistic and poor in features. Windows version of the Oregon Trail conceptually is identical to Oregon Trail Deluxe. The only things that really changed are the graphics, which are now high color, high resolution, and the interface, which is much more ergonomic, user-friendly and easy to operate. But Windows, DOS or Apple II makes no difference. Oregon Trail is a fun game in any version. The software tool works as Star Wars Chess is basically a high-resolution battle chess with less smooth animation and much simpler wars-playing chess engine. One side plays as Rebellion while the other represents the Empire. The game sits in a very odd spot, where you have to fulfill a certain set of requirements to be able to enjoy it. For one, you have to love Star Wars more than anything in the world. and for 2 you have to either be new at chess or very bad at it. Other than that, the novelty of animations wears off quick after you've seen them all once or twice, and then you're left with a bad chess game with incredibly slow gameplay because of the choppy animated combat sequences. Uninvited is a first-person point-and-click horror adventure game. Windows port is easily the best looking out of all the versions that ever came out, but it shouldn't be a surprise as it came out 7 years after the original did. It features beautiful 256 colors, high-resolution VGA graphics, and comfortable Windows interface to drive the adventure. After you crashed your car trying to pass a mysterious dark figure while driving at night, and eventually regained consciousness, you realized that your brother was missing. Given lack of any landmarks in the area other than the nearby dark, gloomy old mansion, you direct yourself towards it to find your sibling. It is evident that the mansion does or did belong to dark force of some kind, as it is now infested with the undead. If you've never had a chance to play Uninvited and love adventure games, especially those harder that have death looming from behind every corner, you'll love Uninvited. It creates an overarching atmosphere of fear, loneliness and impending doom, going through this unfriendly and uninviting mansion, fighting for your lives with each step, all to save your brothers. Windtrek is another of those early shareware hidden gems. It's a Star Trek game, but not really, since it has no official license. So all the races you would have known from the show have slightly changed names so that they would stay within the legal grey zone. In short, expect to meet Romites instead of Romulans, Klingons instead of Klingons, and Fergans instead of Ferengi, to name a few. And you're not part of the United Federation of Planets, but just United Planets. The game features rather un-Star Trek-like scenario too, where rather than seeking peace and resolution to conflict, or even more so scientific discovery, you have to defeat the other alien races. It doesn't mean that it's a bad game, cause it's not, it's just not very Star Trek-y for the lack of a better word. Still, all the other usual series tropes are here, so your ship is armed with phasers and photon torpedoes, and it has a shield and both impulse and warp drives. Windtrek is played in grid universe where you warp between the sectors, locating planets and hunting ships. You can only warp to the nearby sector, and cannot plot long jumps all at once. All of the ship's subsystems can be damaged, and when they are, you have to get to the safe sector to repair them. And by safe, I mean one without any enemies. Windtrek is a simple strategy game with Star Trek-y theme. If you like this and don't mind some obvious inconsistencies with source material, it can be quite fun for a little while. So, what do you think? There weren't many games released in 1993 for Windows, but that's to be expected as it was not really a platform suitable for gaming yet. It will be a bit better in 1994, and we'll see a full lift-off in 1995 with Microsoft's release of Windows 95 with DirectX libraries. That's something to come in a future episode though. For now, let me know what you think. Did I miss a game that's your particular favorite, or maybe a title that deserved covering and was somehow overlooked? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.